game. I am Maximus Kaos, Max Per. This was developed between a spin-off of Aalto University called Valomotion and Aalto University itself in Finland. So if you've seen any of my previous talks, and if you haven't, you should know that people are not exercising enough, so that's the problem I'm trying to solve. One way to solve that is to increase their motivation to exercise, and that can be tackled in a lot of different ways. The way we tried to tackle it is through satisfying their innate human needs. And these are posited by self-determination theory as autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy means that you're feeling in control of your own actions, so you have a lot of agency, you're able to control your own actions. Competence means that you're able to master some sort of challenging task. And relatedness is a way of being able to have a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling of closeness to other people. Games are actually very particularly supportive of this because, well, in autonomy, you can freely explore a game world. You can have different characters that you can choose, different abilities to enhance. And of course, they're built around challenge, so you have different things that you can accomplish in the game that allows you to feel more competent. And multiplayer games can particularly support social interaction. How well they do it depends on the game. So when I say empowered movement, I'm actually talking about exaggerated movement. There have been a number of papers that have dealt with exaggerated movement, but really this has been common in games since the days of Mario. So superhuman movement, exaggerated movement, if you think of Mario doing somersaults, wall jumps, that sort of thing. In the game I'm showing here, Kick-Ass Kung Fu, it was developed back in 2005, but I'm showing that it's a both exaggerated movement in the horizontal and the vertical. Now, the reason that we're showing both of these is that the horizontal movement actually made it difficult to judge how far away you are from the opponent. But the vertical movement was more feeling like you actually had some control, had these superhuman abilities. So where can that translate is the next question. So this has been actually shown in these sort of papers to support competence, and more recently it's been shown to support an autonomy. We developed a game in Super Stomp, is the name of the game, which was the first multiplayer movement empowerment exergame. First design and study of a multiplayer trampoline video game, so that's where this vertical jumping is coming from. And first in the wild study of movement empowerment in general. So the design challenges actually come from the trampolines themselves. Trampolines may motivate physical activity. There are a lot of trampoline parks in the world. You have backyard trampolines. People seem to like them. The problem is that jumping on trampolines can be dangerous. There have been recent studies done saying that especially having more than one person jumping on a trampoline at the same time can cause severe injury. If you get bored after jumping for a while, doing just simple up and down jumps, you may want to think you have to do tricks like somersaults, which can also be dangerous. So we had to find a way in order to make sure that people could do simple jumps and also be able to connect more than one person at the same time without being dangerous. So how do you do this sort of switching from jumping or to standing to walking? That's going to be slow. So we can't actually tell them, okay, now you have to stop jumping and do something else. No, they're going to have to be continually jumping throughout the entire game. So how do you make it engaging? How do you make it safe when they're jumping all the time? I won't go too much into the lag a bit, but there's more in the paper. But how do you also enable multiplayer interaction that's meaningful despite this lag that you may encounter? As I mentioned, the platform, the ValoJump platform, was developed by Valomotion, which was a spin-off startup company from Aalto's research. It consists of a display screen, which shows the game. It also has a trampoline, obvious reasons. A camera which tracks the player's motions, and it also has proprietary software for tracking. It has beyond what the Kinect can do. It can actually track motion based on proprietary software. And a touchscreen display on the right here. You'll see a touchscreen display for administrative purposes. Let me get my laser pointer there. So Super Stomp was developed from earlier research. In earlier research, we found that this very simple act of jumping up and down can actually be engaging if we allow them to stomp on things. So in this video, I'm showing the very simple movement. All they have to do is jump left and right, and then they're stomping on things, but this was found to be very engaging. So this was a single-player games that were just had very simple jumps, and all they were doing is jumping on enemies and obstacles, and they loved it. So from that, the stomp mechanic became a big part of what we call Super Stomp, which is the multiplayer game. And we wanted to emphasize this stomp mechanic because it works so well. So we did this through air particle effects. You'll notice some particle effects coming off from this person here who has stomped. You won't notice here, but strong sound effects we have. We have a camera shake effect. So the whole world will actually shake as they're jumping. And we shake and shatter the ground, and there's also this band of light that just penetrates throughout the entire game world as they actually jump. And to show a bit of that in action, so instead of jumping now on an obstacle, they're jumping on each other. So you notice here that we actually have two setups. We have two different trampoline setups, and we have to connect them through a network, and that's how we got this to actually be safe. So they're no longer jumping on the same trampoline, they're jumping on two separate setups. Now, in earlier experiments with Super Stomp, we noticed that in this sort of networked atmosphere with these video images, if you transfer the whole image, the bones, the skeletal structures, it actually has a lot of lag. And so it's very difficult. And if you are actually allowing people to do precise movements, like if you allow them to kick someone or punch someone, then that can actually result in random flailing. So people would just try to flail against each other instead of doing a meaningful kick. And this also becomes impossible to dodge. And one of the reasons is because when you jump, you actually can't really change your trajectory midair. So it actually creates this sort of dynamic by using the simple jump, the mechanic, of being able to say, okay, well, now I have to predict where someone's going to be. So we evaluated this using a single session in the wild study at an indoor activity park where Super Stomp is played every day. We recruited 26 participants, and we only recruited them after they finished the game because we didn't want to interrupt or interact with their autonomy. We wanted to get them afterwards so that their whole gameplay was not interfering with their autonomy. We could measure it accurately. We had an age range of 6 years to 42 years old. Mostly the parents were the elders, but mostly children. Median age was 10 years old. And we measured this through three methods. One was the physical activity enjoyment scale, which is a validated questionnaire, which has been validated in children as well. The Ubisoft Perceived Experience Questionnaire has been validated for adults, but not children, just so. And we also conducted semi-structured interviews, and none of the questionnaires have been standardized, so we don't know if it'll work across all games, but they have been validated. And what we found was they actually did have high autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In fact, when we actually asked questions that were not directly related to relatedness, they brought up the multiplayer aspects. What were the best parts about the game? Well, that I get to play with a friend or crushing a friend. But we also asked about spectators because, if you'll see, we actually had people line up all the time. People were lining up to see people play this game. And so we wanted to see how exactly did that affect their play experience. And what we found was that it didn't negatively impact their experience. It gave them motivation to play better. And according to the PACES interview, they actually had favorable attitude towards the exercise as well. And finally, we actually asked about the exaggerated movement, the movement empowerment. Did you feel like you have superpowers? And one quote I particularly like is yes, because one can jump so high in it that it looks like you're in some freaking jumping world where there are only characters that jump like all the way to space or something. So they noticed that they had this exaggerated movement. And for the most part, they really enjoyed that. The key takeaways here, we have a multiplayer trampoline game. We developed it. It's feasible to be both engaging and safe. We do support autonomy. That's more in the paper about this. When faced with design challenges, that still was a lag. And we empower movement to support human needs. And I'm going to leave you with a short video and take questions after it. Wait, so, hold on.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. questions?
All right, yes. Who's the, yeah, here in front? Well, I'll give you my microphone, that's fastest.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. Elena Market Segura, Uppsala University. I'm wondering about a couple of things. One of them is about the size of the display.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about it in terms of how it may affect the way that they are looking at it,
Yes.
because it's lower and smaller than the jump, right? And if and how that affected the way they were moving. That's one. And then the second one, I was noticing that, I mean, there is this small delay between their jump and the avatar's jump, right? And I was wondering if you saw them trying to watch the other player physically jumping. There's not that much maybe that they could see from the way that they were positioned, but if that was a strategy that you saw happening, and if you're thinking about using that maybe to rearrange the space so that they can actually like monitor each other's physical actions.
Okay, let's take the first part of that first. So you're wondering, actually, what was the first part? The size of the screen, yes. There was a bunch of testing done with the positioning and sizing of the screen. We found that placing it directly to the trampoline was actually made it too low for their field of vision. So we needed to make sure that they had the field of vision of the screen at all times during the jump. So there was a lot of testing done to determine what the best size was, what the best placement was. More about that in the paper, but yes, there was testing done to determine that. We found that it was best to have it placed a few centimeters away from the trampoline and a little bit vertically up, not directly attached. Otherwise, you can't see it as you're up. As far as strategies for looking at the other player, we didn't come across that because of the way it's positioned. That might be something that Valo looks for in the future, though. Okay.
Okay, we have another question there, to the left. The other side of the room. Yeah.
Maybe I can just speak louder. JC from Microsoft. I wonder if there's some. Did you have to calibrate the exaggeration of the movement somehow so it you avoid making it go like?
Thank you. Making it be too outrageous. I mean, so it feel too unnatural, so you feel detached to the actual movement of the character on the screen.
So I will preface this by saying I'm not the game designer. I designed the study. The ValoMotion people decide the game, so I don't know the technical details behind some of the actions that they made. I do know that there has been a lot of testing done even before Super Stomp, but when they started developing Toy Watch in the first games that I showed, where they tried to do all this calibration. One thing I will note in the paper that we mentioned was that this random flailing part, we couldn't transfer the entire structure of the player, but we could transfer the outline. And so that's why we made it so that any player can use any pose to make a jump and make a stomp. So if you're crouched, you can jump and still hit the other player. If you can do this sort of thing. You can do it from any sort of direction you want, and the stomp will still count. We had to do calibrations to determine who made the stomp, and that was a little bit more technical. But yes, we did do calibrations to figure that out.
Okay, right. I see that there are some other questions, but I don't want to have the evil look of my timekeeper, so we have to move on. Okay. Thank you, Max. Okay, and while the next presenters are setting up, it's actually a co-presentation of Roland and Pallavi.